Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Gabriel Levi, and we're back again with another tutorial, and in this one, I thought it was finally time to take a closer look at thumping. Now, this is one of my all-time favorite techniques, and I've been using it for a little over a decade now, and I think I've come up with some pretty cool ways to apply it to the guitar, and that's what I wanted to share with you today. So some of you might be asking, what is thumping? And it's a fair question because it's kind of a funny word, and I guess it could mean different things in different contexts. I don't know, but for us, it simply means using your thumb like a pick and incorporating other fingers to get different note groupings. So the technique was actually invented by Reggie Wooten, who is the brother of bass player and music educator Victor Wooten. But Victor was really the one who pioneered the technique and kind of brought it forward to the bass community. A bassist named Evan Brewer was taking lessons from Reggie, and he adopted these techniques and started using them in more rock and progressive metal contexts. Toone was in a band with Evan Brewer and basically saw Evan doing all this stuff and was like, yo, you gotta show me how to do that. And so Toone started using these techniques on extended range guitar, and that's ultimately how it made its way to me. I remember seeing a video of him at NAMM. I think he was playing on a Strandberg or something, and you know, his hand was hardly moving, but there were so many notes just flying out of the guitar, and I'm like, I need to figure out how to do that. So that set me on a journey that I'm still on, to figure out how to use this technique in some really musical ways and in ways that just continue to inspire me. So that's the history of the technique as far as I know it, and yeah, man, it was one of those things that really changed the way that I think about the guitar and the way that I approach writing music. I will say it doesn't come easy to most people, so take your time with it, go slow. I know a lot of the examples that you'll see is people just absolutely shredding with it, but seriously, take it slow, make sure that every note is coming out clearly and that your rhythm is on point. All right, grab your guitar, we're gonna look at some examples and just have some fun with it. Let's get into it. All right, guys, hopefully you can see everything okay. I've tried to angle myself so you can see exactly what my hands are doing, but we're gonna start exactly where I started, and that's with the thumb. So we need to make sure that the thumb is giving us the sound that we want before we move on to any of the other fingers. So step one is striking through the string. In this case, we're going to strike through the low E string. And then we're going to land on the A string and just get used to what that feels like. So the motion is similar to a slap, but we're going to do a rest stroke on the A string and then come right back up to get the upstroke. The angle of your thumb is important. I see some guys starting out and they're almost doing like a thumbs up, and the issue with this is when you go through the string, you're almost inevitably gonna mute the string that you just went through. So I like to keep my thumb somewhat parallel with the strings. And when I land on the A string, I'm kind of pushing down on it a little bit to give my thumb a little bit of clearance. And then you can act like the string is a trampoline that your thumb is going to jump off of, which is pretty fun. All right, now we're going to try this on the other strings. I will say the high E string is the most tricky because it's really tiny and you don't have a string to land on once you strike through it. So once you get comfortable with that and you feel like the notes are coming out the way that you want them to, maybe start applying it to a scale. I think the best way to practice any technique is to kill two birds with one stone. So let's say that you wanted to learn the E minor scale. Well, play the E minor scale using thumping. Same applies for any scale, the altered scale or harmonic minor, whatever you pick. The point is that we want to combine this technique with other musical concepts so we're not just focused on mechanics. So now we're going to play the E minor scale on the low E string and just use a down up the whole way through. Notice I'm not getting ahead of myself. keeping things the same tempo all the way through and just checking for any inconsistencies. So now we're going to take the same scale and play it across different strings. So one thing you have to think about is, since we're doing 2 notes with the right hand, the number of notes that we play on each string has to be an even number. So we're going to aim for 4 notes per string. Now, I think where this technique gets really interesting is when we start applying hammer-ons from nowhere with the left hand. And so you're going to see some parallels between this video and my selective picking video, because I actually was doing this thumping technique before I started playing around with selective picking, before it was ever coined that. So we're going to take a G major scale, start with a hammer-on from nowhere, followed by a down, up with the thumb. And we're going to go all the way until we reach the high E string. One thing I should probably mention is, as I'm moving up the strings, I'm trying to use some flesh from my palm to mute the strings that I previously played. Otherwise, you're going to get a bunch of strings ringing out, and that just doesn't sound good. Now, of course, we can take this a little further and do 2 hammer-ons from nowhere, followed by a down up. And I'll just use an A minor pentatonic scale to demonstrate. Alright, there is one other way that I like to use the down up, and it's actually by putting a hammer on between the downstroke and the upstroke. Let me show you what I mean. So we're going to still use the A minor pentatonic scale, but when we strike through the first note, we're going to leave our thumb where it is, then do a hammer on, and then come back up with the thumb. Now, of course, you can use as many hammer-ons with the left hand as you want, but I wanted to show you how much you can get out of the technique just by using the thumb alone. While we're still focused on using just the thumb, I wanted to point out one last thing. You don't always have to get the upstroke. Sometimes I'll just get the downstroke, and since my thumb is already resting on this string, I'll just give it a pop. I'm basically just closing my thumb. And if you combine that with everything else we just covered, you can come up with some really cool stuff that doesn't make you feel like you're stuck inside of a box. So one example of using this down pop technique would be something like this. We're going to do down, hammer, up, down, hammer, pop. All right, now we're on to the second step, which is getting a group of 3 with the right hand alone. So in order to do this, we're going to do a down, up, followed by a pluck with the index finger. We're going to use open thirds in the key of G to practice this. So we're going to do a down, up on the low E string, followed by a pluck on the G. I also think it's really important to practice this on a single string, so we're going to walk up the G major scale using thirds on the low E string. Make sure to go through and practice this on every string. And since we're doing all the notes on a single string, your hand is going to be in a much more closed and locked position than it would be if we were spreading the notes out across different strings like we did using the open thirds. So just for comparison, this is what it looks like on a single string. And spreading it out. So you want to get comfortable with your hand being able to open and close depending on how you're applying the notes. This approach gets really cool when you start to apply it over chords. I don't see a lot of people doing this, and I kind of wish I did because it sounds awesome and it's really easy to do. So you can take any chord shape that you like. I'll use an example from a song that I wrote a number of years ago, where basically I'm just using groups of 3 over the chord and descending with the index finger. This is also a great opportunity to practice your modes using 3 notes per string. Now, just like in the previous segment, we can add a hammer-on from nowhere and follow it up with a group of 3. I like to use a pedal tone on top of whatever chord I'm using, usually an open string. So maybe if I take something like D major 7, I'll hammer on the first note, follow it up with a down up, and then pluck the open B string. All right, we're officially in the final stretch, and that's going to be us getting a group of 4 with the right hand alone. I'm also going to include a group of 5 in this segment, just because why not? So in order to get a group of 4, we're just going to go down, up, pluck, pluck. So that's down, up with the thumb, and then plucking with the index and the middle finger. Now, being able to pull this off is insanely cool, and you can get a ton of notes happening with not a whole lot of effort coming from the right hand. Now, of course, you can practice all of your scales with this. So you can do things like maybe getting a downstroke, hammer, 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 and then getting a group of 4. You can apply it over chords like we did with the groups of 3. We can also hammer on 2 notes on different strings, so we can hammer on a root and a 5th, and then follow it up with a group of 4 on the A string. I think we all know what this riff is. So that's a really great one to use when practicing this group of 4. That was one of the first riffs I ever learned using the technique, and it's something that I still play today. And for anybody who doesn't know, that's from a tune called An Infinite Regression from Animals as Leaders. So I came up with a pretty effective exercise for helping me isolate each one of the movements in a group of 4. Some of the problems you might run into is, yeah, your downstroke is really loud, but the upstroke is really wimpy, and the plucks are somewhere in between. So we can take something like 16th notes, and we're gonna only sound out the downstroke, and then mute the other 16th notes. And then we would do the same exact thing, but this time we're only going to sound out the upstroke. And then again with the first pluck. And finally with the second pluck. And then I would cycle through each of these for one measure. It's honestly pretty difficult, but it'll help you find those inconsistencies across the board. So there's one thing I notice when people are first starting out with this technique, and it's that when they go for the pluck, they tend to grab the string before the previous note was done ringing out, and that's going to give you a very choppy sound, and you might not have known where that sound was coming from, but just make sure that you're timing everything correctly and allowing each note to ring out for its desired duration. We can also get a group of 5 with the right hand alone. So that's a down, up, pluck, pluck, pluck. I probably use this approach the least, especially when I'm on a single string, but it works really well when you spread this out across other strings. So this is from an original tune, and I'm basically combining groups of 4, 5, and 6. So I actually grabbed the high E string with my pinky on this one. So that leads me to the next approach that I wanted to talk about, which is taking advantage of how numbers-based this whole technique is. Things started to get a lot more interesting when I was thinking in terms of larger numbers, maybe 12, maybe 16, maybe even 32. So this is where you want to bust out the pen and paper and get creative with all the different ways that you can add up to the number, let's say 16. If we're taking a group of 16, we can do something like 3 plus 5 plus 4 plus 4. That gives us 16, so we can do something like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's one thing I did in that riff that I wanted to point out, which is grabbing 2 strings on the last note in our group of 4. So you can do things like down, up, pluck, and then pluck with your middle and ring finger to complete the group of 4. That just opens up more harmonic possibilities, and I think it just sounds really cool, and I'd love to see more people doing it. So as you can probably see, you can take this technique and morph it into whatever you want. The sky is truly the limit with this stuff, so use your imagination, be creative, bust out a pen and paper and see how many different ways you can add up to numbers like 16 or 32. And I think you'll be pretty surprised with some of the grooves that you come up with. Things that you would have never done just by jamming in groups of 3 or groups of 4. I hope this clears up any questions that you may have had about thumping in general and how you can start to approach it in a more structured way. I've basically given away all my secrets, so if there's anything you feel like I left out, please leave it in the comments below, and I may have to make a part 2. And just as a reminder, we are not in a race here. So take things slowly, make sure everything is sounding exactly the way that you want them to, focus on your timing, and start making music with this stuff immediately. Okay, now I'm handing this off to you. Take some of these ideas, make something cool with them. That's all that I ask. Have fun, guys. Peace. All right, guys, well, that pretty much wraps up this video. I hope you've learned something about the origins of this really cool technique and how you can start to use it in your own playing. As always, thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Say bye. Bye.